Hi there, I'm Nigel from Louder Than War, and today I'm interviewing Nigel Mitchell, who's one half of experimental electronic music duo Tunnelmental, and along with his partner Derek Pipper, they have produced a really impressive back catalogue of what they call punktronica electronic music with beautiful vocals over the top. They've also produced remixes for bands such as The Membranes, Money Is Dust from the Inner Space Outer Space album. So I caught up with Nigel at his LA home.
So how are you? Are you bright and breezy?
Yeah, I mean, it's, obviously the time difference is you're late afternoon and I'm early morning.
Yeah.
I'm feeling great. I feel really good right now. Just doing music, being creative, trying to practice what I preach.
Yeah.
Because I have my youngest daughter is 17 today, and I'm going around to Joy, and she's wonderful. So I'm gonna go see her after this interview. But I tried to teach them the two words that I think are key to continued growth, and it's two simple words, really. One is diversity. You have to be diverse. Today's world doesn't allow you to be, I'm going to be like my dad. My dad was a mailman his whole life, postman his whole life.
Yeah.
And so, and that was fixed. And then when he retired, he almost had a breakdown because he was institutionalized. You see, he didn't have that diversity within his purview. Everything was supplied for and done through his workplace, and that's how he identified himself. So diversity is something I try and teach my children. Be diverse. If you get an idea to write a book or skydive or whatever it is, pursue that, because that diversity might lead you into a place where you go, oh my gosh, I really like this, and so that, and adaptation, of course. We have to adapt to our times.
You're absolutely right, though, because I have always thought of it like this, that life is like, if you just present yourself and try and balance on one leg or one finger, for example, that's difficult. If you've got two, then that's easier. And if you've got three, if you've got a tripod, and one might be, let's say delivering letters, one might be writing music, and one might be recording music, then at least you have all of these interests that, one, infuse your soul, but two, potentially could provide different revenue streams. And I think anyone that relies on one revenue stream, I've always felt that the ideal situation is to have at least two and maybe three. And therefore it offers a sort of safety element to one's life.
Adaptation is the one. Like, I was born in the 50s. You're whatever your influences. Whatever your influence is, you're like, oh, okay, so that's how you live your life. You get some sort of training as a child, and you look at it through that lens, and then you wake up and you go, oh, wait a minute. People are talking about awakening to a new world, during this current crisis, and it's like, well, I awaken every morning. But the adaptation to the surroundings, that's key to everything. I can go anywhere in the world. I backpack around the world on $50 a week. That was my budget for about a year, and I can go anywhere in the world and adapt to any society I choose, keyword choose, to do, because I don't want to stay tied to a nation state, a way of life, a projection into a future life. I want to keep being creative and flowing. The key to me is to be in this flow. And yes, I know society's upside down. I'm well aware of it. And I think it's upside down for lots of wrong reasons, but I'm adapting to it. I'm now broadcasting from a boom box. Believe it or not, I have a retro fitted boom box that has all the necessary ins and outs. So I've been, I can plug a mic into this big old, and I've spray painted and decorated it. This old boombox. It's got all the necessary ins and outs that can feed into a digital interface, and I can plug it into my computer.
Fabulous.
So I'm using, like, you know, a MacGyver or a I don't know what they call. Do they say MacGyver there for?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've MacGyvered this boombox, and now I can do live broadcasts to YouTube.
Yeah.
Which, you know, allows me to play my music, talk about why I wrote it, and show some visuals that I basically put together an edit for some of the songs I do.
Yeah.
So musically, I'm still creating music, but I'm also finding better ways of getting it out there to the world. It's surprising. The last 3 months, you especially, Nigel, you've said things that are so complimentary about the music I've been doing for 30 years.
Yeah.
And but that it's like you've picked up on one particular song, which I think is beautiful too.
Yeah, me too.
Wrote. I wrote the music and got it all ready and everything, but it was just it was that innocence of an 11-year-old saying something that she genuinely felt. We can.
Yeah.
That's the point of all of this current test in time, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Is as humanity, we have to know. And it's deep knowing. It's not in your it's not in your brain. It's the deep knowing that we can.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that wisdom from when she was 11 years old.
I can't hold this weight without you, without you. I can't run that far without you, without you. Just take my hand and we will get there, we will get there. 'Cause we can, we can, we can.
She wrote that and sang it. So
Amazing. It's an amazing track. It really is. And I played it genuinely because I liked it. And I love what you do, and hence why we're talking. And the connection came completely out of the blue because you called me up on FaceTime and suddenly we were talking. But then I've started to dig into your music, and I've been kind of digging into the past and reading about some of the albums that you've done back through the years, including the remix that you did for the Membranes a couple of years ago. Can I just take you back to the early days and of probably the mid to late 70s and early 80s, and just give me an idea of how you got started and who your major influences were, because I'm guessing it wasn't all electronic music. So how did it all kick off, Nigel?
well, I think after I backpacked around the world for a year, which was kind of me unplugging myself from the system.
This was in the 70s, or when was it?
In the mid 80s.
Mid 80s, yeah.
Right. So in the mid 80s for a year, what happened was I had a windfall. I had a little bit of money come to me.
Yeah.
And I thought, right, I'm selling everything and I'm going to go for a year and I'm going to experience what I perceive to be other countries and the way they live, especially America, because, you know, the huge influence as a child was seeing everything American as being candy coated and fantastic, you know. I mean, it was such a, you know, I mean, I went there expecting to see Fonzie and you know, this candy coated version of America, the Monkees, and I grew up watching and listening to things that were propagandized. I'll use the right word, as the American dream. And when I got there, my blinders came off. So when I came back from a year of traveling, because the last country I was in before I came back to England, was China.
Wow.
I was in Beijing just prior to the Tiananmen Square incident that led to a little bit more of a relaxed government approach than they had before.
Yeah.
Under their dictatorial communism. So, when I came back, I had lots of incredible things that were stuck inside of me. Now, I'd already written some lyrics and poetry as I was going around, and also prior to that, I was always interested in music. Right from the very early days of Radio Caroline, and listening to it underneath my bedclothes as a small child late at night, thinking, oh, these people are, because they even called it pirate radio. And I, as a child, you're like always fascinated by things that are outside the norm. So anyway, so I came back and I thought, well, what do I really want to do? And I was like, what? I love writing music, and I love writing lyrics. I'm going to form a band. And I knew it wasn't radical. I'd been through the 70s punk explosion, so I knew it wasn't radical to form a band. I knew it was just, an expression of what I wanted to do. It was just another thing I could do. So I did. I gathered some mates around, and my initial rush was 10 weeks, 10 songs, then we play our first gig.
And what did you play? What instrument did you play?
I didn't.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right. I heard music in my head. It's kind of I interpreted that through keyboards, because I can play a little bit of keyboards, not much, but so I used the technology that was available, and there wasn't that much, so I adapted, much like my boombox experience. I adapted a whole bunch of technology and did what I could, but also I had an old 4-track that I got, and I just got a bunch of friends together, and we just wrote songs. I said to the guitarist, play this part, and he came up with this part, and I was like, okay, and a bass player.
So you did a kind of Johnny Cash early experiment in that you hummed the music to somebody who was instrumentally cleverer than you in that respect, able to actually put those thoughts into the instrument and actually Absolutely. Arrange it for you, if you like. I get that.
Absolutely. And always in my mind, it was like I was building a template similar to, in my mind, the things I'd heard and read and listened to from people like Crass, Penny Rimbaugh especially. The whole idea of being outside of society's influence, but inside of independence and
a DIY ethic, basically. That's what
totally DIY. Yeah. But so that was, why I ended up, working with mates who, were brilliant, and we remained friends.
Did you have any commercial success in those days, then, Nigel?
we got close with some early demos where people in the industry would say, "Oh my gosh, this is really good. Why don't we do this?" And then, of course, every time they suggested, "Why don't we do this?" I'd be I was a little overreactionary and rejected it.
Was the music electronic, or was it drum, bass, 2 guitars? How was the sound? If you just had to describe it in a couple of sentences.
Hybrid. Always hybrid. Always. So
there were keys in there as well, and synths.
Oh yeah, keys and synths. Early on, drum machines and programming. Whenever we put out recorded stuff, we always knew that, going to the most expensive studio and getting the top producers was always going to be out of our price range. So we did what we could with the technology around at that time, and that's still evident. I mean, even with the much later, I mean, with We Can, with Joy's beautiful singing, you know, she recorded it at 11. We didn't put it out until she was 15.
She has a mature voice for 11 years old, I have to say. If I stood back and heard that for the first time, I wouldn't have automatically assumed that it was such a young girl singing it, you know.
She insists. I mean, she's 17 today, so she insists that we let everybody know that she was only 11 when she did this, because her voice is and still is equally mature as it was then, but she doesn't understand that it was a mature lyric and a mature singing style. Her timbre voice is so sweet.
It sounds like an adult voice, I have to say.
Yeah, but the technology again, you know, we when she was 11 and recorded it in our studio with Derek and I. Derek is my music partner.
Yeah, Derek Pippert.
The one responsible for most of the quality of my music. Often, you know, in the murky past, we take snapshots of things and people would like, oh, this is good, and then we'd send it out, you know, as a cassette or whatever.
Yeah, this is going back to the 80s. Are we talking about now? Yeah. But you know, I keep going backwards and forwards. I'm sorry, but it's you know, but Derek has brought a specific studio producer's ear over the last 10 years. Certainly the last 4 albums. You know, he's brought a particular there's a crispness in the production, which is, I mean, it's very high quality, and that's not just blowing smoke up your arse. It does sound very, very crisp.
It's up Derek's arse. Right. Because as much as I do know and understand and appreciate the technology, I am nowhere near the engineer and producer that he can be. I mean, he worked on it as a side job. You know, we talked about diversity and adaptation. As a side job for about, I don't know, 10 years, maybe even longer. It is longer. He worked as a supervising Foley editor on films, which means he captured and placed all the sounds that you hear in a film, and he worked on. You
mean the instruments in the right position in the sound field where you'd expect to see them?
He just has the most remarkable producer's ears, and he worked on Watchmen. Neighbour's dog barking. He worked on Watchmen. 300. I mean, so many top films, and he was so good at it because his hearing, his sense of production and placement. I mean, he's just a remarkable.
So connect up the timeline from the mid to late 80s to where you've got to now.
Right. Well, the late 80s,
job as an interviewer to keep you on track. You do understand that, don't you?
And also, I mean, chronologically, I kind of feel like I've always been doing this, and I don't even think about the fact that I've been doing it for so long. So when I think about it chronologically, when you ask me questions, I'm like, well, we started in the late 80s in the west of England in a little cottage that I was renting in.
And we're talking Bristol area, are we?
Well, we were in Wiltshire.
Wiltshire.
Yeah. I was born in Cheltenham. My first wife was from Marlborough in Wiltshire, and we ended up living in a village called Burbage on the outskirts, you know, in the middle of Savernake Forest. Yeah. And every Sunday, I would work on music, and then I'd work freelance doing painting, decorating, whatever I could get my hands on. But I'd start writing this music, and then on the Sundays we'd get together with my music mates, and we'd all do an input and write a song. I'd record it on the 4-track, and next week, you know, and kept doing that. So that was in the West Country of England. Then I moved around England for a bit, but we got sent off our first demo tape because I'd been traveling around the world, and I'd met a lot of people because I was sleeping on couches mostly. I met a lot of people when I was traveling, and one of them was we kept pen pals because it wasn't emails, you know.
No, not in those days.
So I kept writing backwards and forwards, and this one person said, "Oh, I know somebody who works at a radio station. They'd love this," because I'd sent him a tape. And I said, "Well, give it to them," you know. So he did, and then I got a letter back from them saying, "You know, you're on full rotation on our radio show."
Oh, wow.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And that's in LA. So I announced to the band. We moved to Swindon because there was more work for me, day work, and then a bunch of people in the band were, you know, we were writing and playing shows around Wiltshire, and we played a couple of shows in London. It was fun, but it was like an interpretation of what I heard. It was never really what I wanted it to sound like. It was guitar, bass, drums, keys, but it was never really sharp and snappy how I wanted it to be. But anyway, we did our thing, and then I found out we got this radio play in LA, and I was like, right guys. One Sunday at practice, I was like, right, that's it. We're off to LA. And they're like,
and this is how you got in touch with Derek, is it? Because he shared your ideals.
No, I think Derek is a very weird anomaly, because we played a show when we were on that first Tunnelmen tour. We ended up being thrown on a bill in Los Angeles with diverse bands. Was, you know, he was in a band that he fronted and played keyboards for, that played as the headline band with this up and coming British band called Tunnelmen supporting, and we became friends.
And he's American, is he?
Yeah, he's American.
Okay. Yep.
He was raised in California, and he was the keyboard player, and he said, "Oh, you'll have to come see our studio we're building. We're building a digital studio." And it was always there in the back of my mind that I would come back and all that stuff. So when I finally decided, we did the first 6 months, then we went to Bristol, did our first album, then we moved to Bristol, and then I lost members of the band because that record label lost its distribution, and they thought that, you know, oh well, it's coming to an end. And I said, no, this is just the beginning. So it was me, the guitarist, and backing singer, who was my ex-wife. You know, we came back to LA, called ourselves Tunnelmental, because I didn't think it was fair to carry it on, because our sound changed, because at that time I managed to blag a cheap studio sampler and sequencer, and we did this weird adaptation of our live show, which was run everything through volume pedals. Guitar volume pedals, each of us on only three of us on stage, actually, plus a dancer. And we played in Bristol, and one of the sound engineers who I used to work with at the Fleece and Firkin used to help us set up, because we ran every sequence, like we had 8 sequences running. We ran every sequence through a guitar pedal, which was a volume pedal. Now, each of the sequences could, in theory, work with each other, which would be a tremendous wall of sound, you know, like just an all-out attack on your senses. All similarly, I mean, some of it discordant. And then a guitarist, and then I had the backing singer, and she was triggering electronic drums, which I made out of plywood and contact mics.
Okay.
So we went, you know, we played a couple shows.
DIY ethic.
Yeah, so we played a couple shows like that, and it was fun. It was fun to do that. But we decided, you know, we wanted to go back to America to see Derek and be in his studio that he was building with a friend. It was a full-on digital studio, and I said, we got to get a deal of some sort. And out of the end of the first label, there were a lot of indie labels that were around, and one of them was an indie label that I didn't realize was on its last legs too.
Oops.
Called Fundamental Records, which actually had some really great artists on it. And I was like, wow, they want to do, and I talked to Richard Jordan, who was basically running it, and he said, yeah, I've got a lot of little subsidiary labels and we distribute. He said, but we haven't got much money up front, but we want to do an album with you. And I said, well, how much money can we get? Because, I'm just straight up Joe Bloggs, he'd seen us play once in England when he was on a soiree or, an A&R scout going around the indie clubs. And he saw us play this bizarre show once with all these pedals. And he said, okay, I can give you X amount of dollars. And I was like, well, that covers 3 of us to fly over to America. So I contacted Derek and his music partner, Jeff, and I said, look, it's time. Jeff was his studio partner at the time. And it was in Jeff's house, the digital studio. And I said, we can't pay you. We'll have to sleep on your floors. But the EP is, because I told Richard Jordan, I said, it's not enough for an album. It's enough for an EP. I'll do 4 songs. He said, okay. So I told Jeff that, we can't afford anything except our flight over, really. And, we'll work, do little day jobs, but we want to record these 4 songs. And we ended up 6 months staying there. And then we extended that because we were on a small American label. And we just stayed on for a bit, and then I did some backwards and forwards stuff from there on. But the 4 songs we recorded there, we put out on Fundamental Records, and they went bankrupt. And then Richard Jordan came over to me, was driving around the country in a minivan full of CDs from all the bands that he had on his label, trying to sell them at ma and pa stores, get them to take them on buy or return, stuff like that. So I met with him, and he said, I can give you yours. And I was like, okay. I said, I'll do the best to distribute them. Thank you for your help. And he was
How has the music progressed then? Sorry to interrupt. How's the music progressed from those early Tunnelmen days and what became Tunnelmental and the recording of those tracks to the almost, I hesitate to say industrial sound, because it reminds me of kind of Violator era, Depeche Mode, maybe Einstürz and the Neubauten and that. Where do the influences come from, and how has that infused the sort of last 10 years of the music, which appears to be a particular direction, which is this electronic hum sound?
Yeah. I mean, that's Derek. That's Derek and I working together and being completely synchronous. That synchronicity when you're with somebody. Okay, you'll go home tonight, or if you're
I'll
home,
walk over the garden there.
When you go from your shed to your house tonight, yes. You'll know what your wife's doing. She'll know what you're doing,
roughly,
and you'll be floating around the house and doing your thing and having your dinner, having your tea, whatever. And there's no having to explain what you do. You know what I mean? That synchrony. Derek and I, for the last 10 years, have been treating making music as our day job. We both have family that we take care of. So we don't have a long day. We usually start around 9:30, 10 in the morning and finish by 4 in the afternoon. We have a little break for lunch. But we've been treating it like a day job and just going in and sitting in a room, barely conversing, and just writing music and lyrics and just letting it go. But your greatest compliment that you just gave us that you did inadvertently was the Depeche Mode.
Yeah.
Because when Derek and I got together, I could write 20 bands that I really love, and he could write 20 bands he really loves, and we could put them side by side, and we could go, "Wow, why are we together?" I mean, not that there weren't overlaps, but some of the overlaps were things like, you know, Depeche Mode, Kraftwerk.
But those bands work because of, you know, in Depeche Mode's case, because of Martin Gore and Dave Gahan, because they gelled together, and Martin's such a great tunesmith. You know, you go back to Kraftwerk, who you just mentioned, and what's his name just died? Oh, God, Florian Schneider, and of course, you know, they were just those collaborators. It's the collaboration of two very like minds that make those bands work, and that's,
and there has to be a somewhat of a juxtaposition in their influence, because that's what brings the hybrid. You know, that hybrid that happens, and I really love that. I mean, I love that about what Derek and I are doing. I mean, Derek's just such a genius at production, and I sit there and it's like immediately I hear a sound, I'm like, I put the pen to paper and it runs away.
How did the remix project with the Membranes come by?
I think I was seeking some publicity for something we were releasing, and I came across this fanzine sort of magazine on social media called Louder Than War, and of course I'm an activist pacifist, and I was like, oh, Louder Than War, I like the idea of that. And then I read about it, and I saw who was the editor, and it was John Robb, and then I'd obviously heard of the Membranes, so I was like, okay, I'll listen to some of the stuff. And I saw John Robb was putting out an album, and then the album was, I think I heard a couple tracks from it, and then he said he was doing a full remix album of it, and I was like, oh, you know, because we'd already done some remix work for friends and stuff like that in our studio, because we love working on other people's music.
I bet you do, because you can almost strip it back and create a tune over the top. And I love, have you heard 20 Mixes for Cash, the Aphex Twins remix album?
No, I want to.
Oh, you must listen. So what they do, what Richard D. James did, he literally just sort of wrote another tune over the top of the original source material and virtually threw the original away. And if you listen to 20 Mixes for Cash, you'd struggle on some of them to recognize the original track.
Wow.
What's next for Tunnelmental then? You had the album out just recently. So
you can say it if you want, and nobody will think you're swearing.
Arseholes, wasn't it? Or something like that, wasn't it?
Nobody will think you're swearing if you say a few arseholes.
A few arseholes.
F you arseholes. It depends how you say it, really. You know?
Exactly.
I'm doing what I do. I want to be a creative human being. I want to be a productive human being, and I'm going to be a productive human being.
Yeah.
There's nothing going to deter me from that.
Have you got music in the pipeline ready for the next album? Are you going to be dropping a few singles over the next? It's
weird. It's so weird. Since this incredibly weird situation has come up over the last 6 months, we had some stuff that we were experimenting with different singers, and it's been a joy to try and to go back and go, oh, wait a minute, that was a good part. So we're actually going in on some of the stuff with female singers that we've had in the studio that came and did backup, and then we just recorded other parts, and we thought, well, you know, it's always in the memory banks, you know, because you say.
Is Joy going to be doing some more for you?
Joy wants to record. She's written probably 4 or 5 full songs, and then got lots of little bits, but it's her and a ukulele is how she records.
Has a wonderful voice. She has a voice of an angel on that track. It's fabulous. It's amazing.
And as she's got older, it's become a lot more adventurous. She's starting to. I mean, she does listen to a lot of other people that she loves. She loves girl singers, obviously, but you know, there's a little influence creeping in on some of it. But at the same time, she, like you say, it's the timbre of her voice and the way, the emotion with which she delivers.
It is the way she delivers it. It's very, very strong, very forward.
Yeah.
It belies the age. It really does. I'm going to start wrapping it up, Nigel, because any longer, then we're going to switch people off. But what's so refreshing for me is that, one, the music has a brightness to it. It's a refreshing brightness to it. And like I said, I wasn't blowing smoke up your arse when I was talking about your music. I do feel it enthralls me. I want to play more of it. I actually went back to listen to Shooting from the Lip and listen to some of the tracks on there, and I can't remember the track that I listened to. It was Annihilation. It began with an A. I can't remember which one it was, but that was tremendous. And I love the one featuring Joy as well. And I hope you continue to produce wonderful music that engages people. It really does, and it lifts the spirit listening to that type of music too. And one thing that I would say about you, like my Auntie Kath, who was in Australia for 40 years, 50 years when she passed away, she still had her Scouse accent. And it's very refreshing to see that despite the years you've spent in LA, you still have a sort of West Coast accent. And when I say West Coast, I mean West English Coast. Absolutely brilliant. And thanks so much for speaking to me today. It's been a pleasure. It really has. Yeah, fabulous.
Thanks very much. Great. I mean, you've done everything right for me as a writer. I mean, I've read through all your stuff. We don't necessarily agree on what's the best of music and what's the worst of music on certain issues, but you have the integrity that journalists had.
Right. That's nice to hear. Thank you.
No, I mean, you write so well, and your radio show is an educational masterpiece. I want my children to listen to your radio show just to show the diversity and the, again, adaptation that comes from a musical journey of integrity.